Welcome to the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I'm your host, Lyndsay Dowd. My goal is to help train leaders and sales organizations how to manage and deliver results with empathy, compassion, and kindness. Let's get started. Greetings and welcome to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. If you've been with us for any amount of time, you know we bring some pretty incredible people onto this podcast, and we have a bunch of really spectacular female athletes, and today is no exception. So please welcome Joanna Lohman to the call. Joanna is a leadership coach and a youth sport innovator who elevates performance through authenticity and resilience. She's the author of Raising Tomorrow's Champions and a keynote speaker for leading organizations. She's a former professional soccer player and a member of the women's U.S. national team. She is the first player in Washington Spirit history to have her jersey retired. During her 16-year professional career, she built a platform for social impact, which we are going to talk about. And she continues her influence as a performance coach, human rights activist, and sport diplomat. Joanna, welcome.
Woo! I got to say, Lyndsay, I don't know if this is intentional brilliance or unintentional brilliance of having me on just after the World Cup final.
I know.
So
the timing
I'm still
good.
buzzing.
The
still
timing
buzzing
is
from
good.
that final.
And okay, let me just first ask, soccer or football?
Can I say yes and? I want to say both. It depends on the country that I'm in. If I'm in
Agreed.
America, I'll say soccer. If I'm in England or around the world, it's football or football.
Agreed.
So,
Agreed.
Yeah.
I kind of take issue that we're the only place on earth that calls it soccer, so we kind of should get with the times, but
yeah.
What happens? That would put out our football playing friends, which we've had a few of them on too. So anyway, welcome. I would love it if you'd share a little bit about your background, a little bit about your story.
I would love to share my story. I was a professional soccer player for 16 plus years, and I played on 7 different teams in 5 different countries. I love to joke that I could be the most undecorated player to have her jersey retired.
Oh, stop.
And no, it's true. My lowlights exceed my highlights. And that includes being a survivor of 2 failed professional leagues in the United States. I played in 3 championship games. I lost all of them, Lyndsay.
Oh.
I tore my ACL, which should have been the best season of my career. I spent years where I was on the bench more than I was in the field. And you'll enjoy this one the most. I would say on average, I got paid between $15,000 to $18,000 a year playing professional soccer. So yeah, you can let that one stab you in the heart. And then I came out at the age of 21 after being engaged to a man. I cut off all my hair in 2007, creating what you see now, which is the Joe Hawk. And I wake up every day pushing gender norms, pushing societal boundaries, living as my own walking, talking form of resistance. So, I can dive into any of that even more.
Yes, we're going to dive into all of that.
Yeah,
no, we're going to dive into all of that. So I think there's a natural, a lot of metaphors and a lot of similarities to sports and business. And obviously, when you have a coach, there's some leadership styles. Talk about some of the leadership styles that really worked for you and maybe some of the ones that were really awful.
Yeah. This is such an important topic, especially recently, because there have been multiple reports that have come out as of late in terms of I would say, pervasive abuse and sexual misconduct that has been detailed throughout the National Women's Soccer League, which was the league that I played in.
Right.
And it's a true highlight of poor leadership. And I was on CNN recently discussing what is it like to have an abusive coach, and what is the difference between a leader or a coach who pushes you very hard and a coach that is abusive. And sadly, I've had both. I've had coaches that I felt like inspired me to be better, right? A better version of myself. Mm-hmm. That's what great leadership looks like. People don't go the extra mile for what you care about. People go the extra mile for what they care about, right? So a beautiful leader, a beautiful coach will inspire you to go that extra mile because you care deeply about what you do and you care deeply about the team that you are a part of. So it's that connection to the community, right? Connection to your team, the connection to what you are doing and your own personal values. and then the essence of development and betterment, right? That's what an incredible coach figures out. And I would say poor leadership, an abusive coach is someone who motivates through fear, right? When we motivate through fear, we may get a short-term result, but the long game that we are playing, the long-term result is a true degradation of confidence, a true degradation of self-worth, a deep sense of questioning my own intuition. And what was incredible about this report that was released by Sally Q. Yates, the former Attorney General, was that she connected the abuse that we silence in the professional levels down to the youth levels, that we normalize this type of leadership for our children, for our youth. And so they grow up thinking that being screamed at, being torn apart, being abused is the
way it is.
Is the definition of leadership. Have you seen that in your own experience?
Yes. And that's why I love when we have athletes on, because it's the easiest analogy to show a coach and performance. And it's always been intimidation, belittling, aggression, fear, all of that demeans your people. And it does not inspire them. It does not encourage them to rise up and be their best. And I think we're in this kind of awakening right now where we're talking about this and we're really identifying that this isn't soft skills. This is actually a tenet of good leadership. And, if you scare your people or, demean them, you're not going to bring out their best. You're just going to chop them down a little bit. So I totally agree. And I just think it's so shocking what you've gone through. I mean, and I do a lot with, seeking fair wages. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know there was such an incredible fight for women's soccer to get equal pay. So what was your part in that or your experience?
So we had an historic year for women's soccer. In 2022, they signed the collective bargaining agreement that promised the U.S. women's national team equal pay. And this is unprecedented, Lyndsay. This has never been done before in history. So, and it also includes FIFA World Cup winnings. So let's give an example. So for the U.S. men's national team, when they advanced from the group stage to the knockout round, the men's national team made $13 million for advancing. And now that we have equal pay, the women's national team got 6.5 million of that. They got equal to the men. And that 6.5 million exceeded what the women were paid for winning 2 World Cups. So they got paid more, the men, for advancing in the men's World Cup than the women.
And not winning.
Combined for winning 2 full World Cups. So this is absolutely massive. And this is going to have ripple effects in the business world. This is going to have ripple effects for what you're doing and really advocating, helping women negotiate for equal pay, because we can use this as a shining example. This is the lighthouse, right?
I mean, it's an easy example. It's it's so much harder in business because you don't talk about pay and, and people don't know what their peers are making until someone tells them. And then it's like, what? So, this is such like a transparent view of the possible and how to make it right. So here's the question. Did they retro any of the women's soccer teams? Good.
Yes. I think, don't quote me, but I think it was 26 million, 24 million in back pay. So depending on, I didn't get any of that, but depending on any of like the rosters that you make, the World Cup rosters, Olympic rosters, it trickled down to the previous players, because as you know, we stand on the shoulders of the generations that come before us.
That's right.
So the women's national team dates back to 1985 was the first iteration of the team. And these players were playing for pennies, Lyndsay, literally $10 a day. Julie Foudy talks about it in the history of the women's national team. So it was so important to recognize all of the women in the suffragette movement, right, for voting, like all these women who stood up in the face of resistance to demand this equality. And gave the current players the strength, the unity, the mindset to really demand what they are worth. And this ties into what you asked about what is great leadership. Great leadership, a great foundation is one of psychological safety. So now if these players can show up and feel like instead of just trying to survive, they can thrive in their positions. Because when we think about the greatest excellence, we think about greatness, you have to be able to show up with a clear mind in a state of flow, right?
Yeah.
To really achieve that greatness. And if you're worried about how much am I getting paid? Oh, by the way, when I get home from practice, I have to go work at Starbucks because I need to make extra money. I have to go coach for 3 hours on the field. And you can't dedicate yourself to your craft, to your profession, to your mind, because you were so worried about survival.
Yeah.
And our brain is already wired for survival. So you need these pieces in place, this foundation to really build. What we're going to see now is just this increasing standard in women's soccer, selling out stadiums, ownership by Abby Wambach and Glennon Doyle and Jenna Porter and, Natalie Portman. Like, we're seeing women's soccer totally hit the global stage, and we're seeing it trickle down to women in business, female leaders. Like, we are at a point where we're tipping, right? And we know our value, and we will not settle for anything less than it.
Well, and it feels like a shift in women's sports altogether. Like it, to me, I'm seeing it in basketball. I'm seeing it, I really love when my husband, big guy, 6'4", sits down and he's like, we're watching women's basketball, we're watching women's something. He's like, I love watching this. And I just look at him like, that's so great. I mean, and he's watching it for the sport. He's not watching it for the gender. He's absolutely interested in what they're doing as a team and how they're working and the plays they're having. I just think it's great. So I think that's just so cool. And I just hope it continues. So talk to me a little bit about, we talked a little bit about psychological safety, and it's been said, I really believe that this is such an important piece of leadership. And when you can provide that, your people are able to do their best. But there is a camp of people that think psychological safety means you don't have to try as hard and you're going to be able to. So talk about your feelings on that.
Yeah, that strikes me that people think you don't have to try as hard. Psychological safety, to me, is enabling an environment where people can take risks. And so you're actually trying harder. You're actually pushing outside of your comfort zone, where we experience peak motivation, where we experience growth, and you feel safe to push outside your comfort zone because you realize when you fail, because failure is such a huge piece of growth and success, you will be in a safe space, right? So you aren't worried about showing up as your true self, giving your all, being vulnerable in that space, because you're in an environment that supports that risk taking. And the most innovative companies, the most successful companies create this environment where they encourage their employees to take risks, knowing that's going to come with mistakes. It's going to come with failure. It's going to come with falling on your face. And when we have that challenge, that's when we create the change. I can speak about it in my own life. Like the moments that I have really have transformed as an individual are the moments where I've experienced true failure, right? Failure, coming out, losing championship games, getting injured. These were the moments that forced me to completely transform my identity, because I was shattered, right? I was shattered. I had to pick up the pieces and reinvent who I was as a human. And I wouldn't be who I am today without being able to take those risks. And if we don't have organizations, teams, environments where we encourage those around us to take those risks, then it's going to be status quo, right? If not, if not some degradation of performance, because other companies that do have that environment will be innovative, right? And they're going to be progressive, and they're going to be cutting edge, and we're just going to be falling behind.
So you did have some pretty devastating injuries, and where was that in your career that it happened, and how did you come back from it?
I would say, so it was 2017, and in 2017, 2016 was the best season of my life. So 2017, I was building on it. I was bigger, faster, stronger, smarter. I was going into the first game of the season really with a vision of the greatest season I've ever had, right? Top goal scorer. I was in commercials for the entire league. I was a veteran. I was a rock star. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was the first game of the season in the 11th minute, and a ball bounces into midfield, and I stretched with my left leg, and my knee came down, and it just buckles in. And this says a lot about me as a person and my character. I played for 6 minutes. I continued to play for 6 minutes on a torn ACL, which is your anterior cruciate ligament.
Ow.
And then my knee buckled 2 more times, and they had to basically drag me off of the field because it was, the vision of my life was I was going to be one of the best players on the team. And I had worked so hard in my career. I'd survived 2 failed leagues. Like, the league was sustainable. It was my moment. Right. And when you feel like your moment is erased in an instant, it's you have to mourn the death of who you thought you were going to be. Right. That's what rejection represents in our world. That's what failure represents in our world, is understanding that it is a piece of rejection, and it's being able to accept what your current reality is and be able to still move forward with that acceptance of my life is going to be different. And when I look back, I always say, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because like so many of us, I wrapped my identity so tightly around what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see myself as a whole human being, nor did I realize what I contributed to this world outside of kicking a ball. Mm-hmm. And it provided such a beautiful way to struggle and to share that struggle. Yeah, to share that struggle with the world, and to incrementally see myself improve, and then take my first steps of walking, get through surgery, be able to kick a ball again. And it was very humbling as a professional athlete when people see you as fast, strong, almost invincible, to then be starting from scratch. And it gave me the opportunity to really expand my identity. And I went to my first ever Pride Parade. I was part of a documentary. So I was able to see myself for all of the imperfect characteristics and personality traits. And it was a huge step in rounding out who I was and being able to take a step past soccer, because it was just 2 years later that I retired, and I felt like a true authenticity deep into my core because I had those tests of my identity and I was able to get through it.
I love so much of what you just said. And I had a similar story. I was living really fast, and I was not being grateful. My parents were separating, and I was being kind of a jerk to my parents, and I ended up breaking my hip. And it was the only thing that was going to slow me down. And at the time I was angry. I was pissed. I was so mad. I was in the hospital. I had to have massive surgery. And it stopped me dead in my tracks. And I just remember my mom saying these really wretched words to me because I was being awful. She's like, "You are just so ungrateful, and you're just being unbearable, and I don't even want to be around you." And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? And it completely changed the way I saw the world. It completely changed the recognizing who I wanted to be. And that beautiful struggle that you talked about.
How long ago was that?
Oh God, I was 19. So
okay.
But 4 surgeries later, I'm still going.
How was the relationship with your mother after that?
Incredible improvement. And I think it really took hearing her say those very harsh words to me, which I needed. It was like a slap across the face without the slap. I needed it. And, it made me smarten up. But for you, it was different. You had to get in the struggle of it all and see yourself differently. And there's some real beauty to that.
It strikes me, and credit to you that you heard what your mom said, right? So many of us can really ignore or push it aside because we get really defensive, and it hurts, right? To hear something like that. And when I think of authentic leadership, when I think of who we are as human beings, like, we are constantly evolving. And so often I think we measure our identity through a conclusion versus our evolution. And that's something that's something that I'm really working towards now, is helping the world see that this is about the transformation of a human, right? This is about, if I can use a word that relates to animals, this is about like molting, right? Like shedding your skin multiple times throughout our life to become a bigger, better version of who we are. And we can only shed that skin when we feel uncomfortable, right? We have to have that catalyst.
I love that you said that, because so many people will talk to me about, oh my gosh, I was a terrible, terrible leader. And people ask all the time, Lyndsay, do you think people can change? Do you think they can grow? And I say yes, because I've met so many leaders who were like, I was an asshole. But I have recognized the kind of leader I was then is not who I want to be now. And my team respects me, and I have friendships now, and they would stick their neck out for me. And it's because they're authentic, and it's because they're coming in with kindness and praise. And I just think it's just the human form is not, set in stone when you're born. Like you're capable of so much change. So talk a little bit about coming out and what that was, talk about a molting, right? That was such a bold move. When did you know, and what was the timing like? Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I shed my skin completely in that situation. I was a senior in college, and I was engaged to a really nice young man. And what's interesting is, if you see pictures of me as a kid, you would probably shake me and be like, Joe, like, you're very gay. Like, look at your haircut, look at what you're wearing, look at what you're doing. And this is not to like generalize, right? You can't paint a picture of a lesbian, and not everyone fits into a certain box, but there definitely were signals, I think. But what's interesting is that you can't be something that you don't see. And I didn't have any role models.
I say that all the time. Yes. I love that.
And it wasn't part of my language. It wasn't something that I discussed. And I have the most amazing parents, and I grew up in the most incredible neighborhood, but it wasn't something that was discussed because it wasn't prevalent, right? It wasn't relevant at that time. So I grew up thinking that my only options for identity were, when it came to gender, it was on the binary. Either I was a boy or a girl. And clearly I was a girl, when really I sat like smack dab in the middle. I was a huge tomboy. And then when it came to sexual orientation, I had one option, and that was straight. So check, right? Like, I went through my life, staying in those lanes, not really questioning it. And it wasn't until I was in college, when a teammate of mine, I was attracted to her, she was attracted to me, that I was like, oh, this is a way
happening.
Yeah. And at this point, many boyfriends later, right, I was doing what any traditional straight cis woman would do. I was dating men, and I had found a great guy who asked me to marry him. And when he asked me, Lyndsay, I swear I blacked out. And I got home, and my older sister was like, Joe, are you okay? Because I was crying, but like crying in a way that was more pain than joy.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And
I'm fine.
Not okay. So, and then my mom, bless her, like took me to go wedding dress shopping, and I just like broke down in tears. I clearly wasn't ready to do this. And she was like, okay, sweetheart, like, let's just wait. This isn't right in this moment. And so the signals again were showing up, and I was around this woman, my teammate, every day of college. And it got to the point where the attraction was just overwhelming. And I remember, my first experience with her, I always joke that I got hit by the gay stick. It was just like, boom, it was an immediate, like, wow, like this is who I'm meant to be. And this is how it's supposed to feel. So it was almost like a true epiphany, an overnight revelation in my life. And, not to say it was easy then after, you never stop coming out, right? So you slowly tell the people you feel safe around, but, now the way that I show up in the world, it seems quite obvious to most that I'm a walking, talking lesbian, as I like to say. But, when I travel overseas, again, when we talk about people don't have the language for it, I 4 years in a row, I went to Africa, I worked for the State Department. And when I land in these countries, nobody knows that I'm gay. And I don't speak about it because it's very often illegal. So people ask me, do I have kids? Do I have a husband? And I just I say no and I smile, and I realize I'm there. I do my work. I am joyous. I am full on Jo Lohman. And then when I get home, they follow me on Facebook potentially, and then they see like, oh wow, like I just met a lesbian. I just met someone who is gay, and maybe I'm opening their mind and their world to how a woman can show up in the world that's different than what they expected.
Well, I
So
mean, look at the awareness or the lack of awareness that you had, and then
yeah,
the awakening that you went through. And I just thank you for sharing that. That's
yeah, of course.
it's a great story. Talk a little bit about your book.
Yeah. My book, Raising Tomorrow's Champions. So clearly, I'm very passionate about being part of the women's national team. It is a very exclusive group. Since their first iteration in 1985, there's only been about 250 women who have ever played for the United States women's national team. So it is a very elite group of women where I feel like we can learn incredible lessons from what they went through. So it's a parenting and life lessons book from the greatest women's soccer players of all time. And the beauty of it is it's not a book that necessarily says you must be great at something and this is how you do it. There's a lot of nuance, and it's like a well woven quilt of stories, of science, of trying to help parents guide kids to whatever path that they want to achieve, like whatever path they want to be on for their own version of greatness. How do we show up as parents? Because so very often we parent, we lead through fear, and that fear shows up from our own trauma and experiences. That fear shows up of
pass on
protection.
What you've learned.
Yeah. And I want to protect my kids so badly that I want to snowplow all their problems and rejections and I would say adversity out of the way. So it's a really like digestible book in terms of the lessons that we teach. And it's almost chronological timeline of what a youth athlete would go through in their rise through sports. So it talks about leadership, and you get to hear from Abby Wambach. It talks about gender and race and sexual orientation. You get to hear from Mia Hamm about what was it like to be one of the first female athletes of Nike. You get to hear from Brianna Scurry about what it felt like to be one of the few players of color on the women's national team. And so it's really powerful in that sense, where you get to hear firsthand experiences from the players who went through it. And it's, looking back on their own childhood and their own life of the keys that help them get to where they are now. So
sounds amazing. I can't wait to read it.
The pictures are from the players themselves, and it's all color. It's really beautiful. So it is a fun read for any parent. It's a fun read for anyone who's a fan of the women's national team. And it's just, it's an easy book to just pick up and be like, you know what? I want to read about adversity. I want to read about leadership. I want to read about injuries, right? And you can really get some solid nuggets and learning from it.
I bet. That's amazing. I mean, it sounds like a whole lot of resilience in there too, which is
absolutely
the stories that everyone loves. And, I talk a lot about resilience because, just like we were saying with leadership, can you change? Can you grow? Absolutely, you can. And I think resilience plays a really big part in that. So tell everybody, what is a sport diplomat?
A sport diplomat is someone who travels the world using sport as a vehicle for social change. So I didn't really know it existed until I fell into it. And I every time I get back from a trip, and it's very intense, it's long days, incredibly hard work. And I consistently think like, I can't believe this is my life. I can't believe that, first of all, I became a professional athlete, because it didn't exist when I was a kid. And now I get to use this position to change lives around the world. So to give a simple example, the last trip I went on was to Nigeria, and we combined sport with a vehicle of social change. So in Nigeria, we talked about human trafficking. So we have a sport portion, and then we have local leaders, delegates, NGOs, nonprofits, organizations that teach the young women what is human trafficking. We had a speaker that came that was a survivor of human trafficking. So someone from their community, because as a white woman, parachuting down into Nigeria, I'm very aware that I can only, go so far in terms of my impact, right? And that's not my place. So we're there to really coach the soccer portion, to inspire these young women and to show a different version of what a woman can be. And then we implement the more local, powerful social change aspects through meetings and informational conversations. So I learned so much. I learned so much about myself. I gained so much perspective on what it's like to be a woman in America, how much privilege I possess as a woman in America with the color of my skin and the family I was born into. So it is, it's life learning that you can't get from a book, right?
No. Well, and travel alone is such an incredible teacher, but to be in that forum talking about so much social change it's so moving, and it's impossible to not be inspired. It really, I mean, it's incredible stuff. Is it organized by like a presidential administration?